In a world where honor and bloodlines dictate fate, Corin Lay, a humble systems engineer from Earth, is thrust into an unimaginable journey. When he stumbles into a sacred duel on the alien planet of Ketchan, he inadvertently claims victory over the fierce warrior Valar of House Veraxian. The price? An oath that binds them together, a galaxy-shaking mistake that neither of them anticipated. As Vala battles her own pride, Corin must navigate Ketchan's ancient traditions, enemy invasions, and a bond forged in the fires of a sacred duel. But their relationship is more than an oath. It's a cosmic connection that could reshape both their worlds. Will Corin survive the political and physical battles ahead? And what happens when love and duty collide in the heart of a warrior's arena? Join us on this epic journey through alien customs, heart-stopping duels, and forbidden love. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling sci-fi stories with deep emotional twists. Under the eternal violet dusk of Ketchan, where starlight drowned in a haze of amethyst and gold, the ceremonial arena stood as a monument to honor's brutal dance. Its crystalline walls, carved from the planet's core, refracted light into a shimmering cascade, a geode split wide to bare its pulsing heart. Here, steel sang hymns of life and death, and the fate of bloodlines hung on a blade's edge. Valar of House Veraxian ascended the translucent steps, her deep purple skin gleaming like polished obsidian, bioluminescent veins flickering with her heartbeat. Her armor, a sleek lattice of black and violet, clung to her voluptuous form, accentuating her full breasts and rounded hips, a provocative blend of warrior's steel and siren's allure. Her silver hair swayed in a high braid, and her golden eyes burned with a fire that could sear souls. Today, she would reclaim her family's honor, or lose everything. The arena loomed before her, a vast amphitheater of tiered seats hewn from Ketchan's native stone, their surfaces catching the twilight in a mosaic of purples and blues. Thousands of her people, their skin ranging from deep indigo to pale lavender, watched in reverent silence, their elaborate headdresses glinting with gemstones and family crests. The high houses had gathered, their ceremonial armor adorned with precious metals, each insignia a silent boast of lineage and power. The air thrummed with anticipation, heavy with the weight of tradition and the promise of blood. Vala's fingers tightened around her twin blades. Heirlooms passed through 15 generations, their edges humming with an energy field that could slice through starship hulls yet halt at flesh. Perfect for duels of honor, not death. Her family's shame, born of her brother's cowardice, had cast a shadow over House Veraxian. He had fled from battle, abandoning his post, and now the whispers of disgrace followed her like a curse. This duel was her crucible, her chance to burn away the stain or be consumed by it. Vala's breath was steady, though her heart pounded with the weight of generations. She had trained for this moment since childhood, her muscles sculpted by endless drills, her reflexes honed to a razor's edge. Every step she took echoed with the lessons of her father, High Commander Zalvar, whose stern voice still rang in her mind. Honor is all. Without it, we are nothing. Her brother's betrayal had wounded him more than any blade, and now she, the last hope of House Veraxian, bore the burden of redemption. The ceremonial master, an elder with skin faded to a ghostly lilac, raised his staff, its crystal tip glowing. Enter the sacred space with honor, or not at all, he intoned, his voice amplified across the arena, a deep resonance that seemed to shake the very stone. She stepped onto the polished obsidian floor, her armor catching the light in a cascade of violet sparks. The crowd's silence deepened, a collective holding of breath, as if the planet itself awaited her triumph. Her opponent's chamber remained sealed, a dark portal across the arena, its occupant hidden. Vala narrowed her eyes, her senses sharpened by years of combat. She had expected Kalia, a rival from House Silthar, whose teal skin and venomous ambition had long clashed with her own. Kalia's taunts had followed her for years, a constant reminder of her family's fall. But something felt wrong. The air carried a faint hum, a disruption she couldn't place. Far below the arena, in the labyrinthine tunnels that sustained Ketchan's environmental systems, Corin Lay muttered curses under his breath. His unruly brown hair fell into his eyes as he wrestled with a flickering conduit, its readings erratic. A systems engineer from Earth, he had come to Ketchan to study its advanced technology, lured by the promise of innovation and a hefty paycheck. His jumpsuit was stained with grease, his tools scattered across the tunnel floor. Just one more junction, he grumbled, oblivious to the sacred ritual unfolding above. The tunnel was cramped, its walls lined with glowing conduits that pulsed like veins, a testament to Ketchan's ancient engineering. Corin's flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows, and he cursed again, unaware that his path was about to veer into the heart of an alien crucible. Vala's gaze remained fixed on the opponent's chamber, her blades raised in a defensive stance. The crowd's anticipation was a living thing, pressing against her skin. She could feel their eyes, their judgments, their hopes. House Veraxian had once been revered, its warriors' legends, its name synonymous with valor. Her brother's failure had reduced it to a cautionary tale, and now she stood alone to rewrite its story. The ceremonial master's staff glowed brighter, a signal that the duel was imminent. "Let honor be restored through trial of skill," he declared, and the crowd leaned forward, their silence a taut wire ready to snap. The opponent's chamber slid open, and Vala tensed, expecting Kalia's sleek form to emerge. But the figure that stumbled into the light was wrong. Awkward, hesitant, clad in ill-fitting ceremonial armor that seemed to weigh him down. Corin blinked against the arena's glare, his human face pale and confused, his brown eyes wide with panic. The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the stands. Vala's golden eyes narrowed, her mind racing. This was no warrior, no champion of a rival house. He was an outsider, an off-worlder, his presence a mockery of the sacred ritual. Yet the laws of Ketchan were clear. Once a duelist entered the arena, the combat must proceed. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp, carrying the melodic cadence of her people. Corin raised his hands, the ceremonial sword he'd been handed dangling awkwardly. "I'm just a tech. There's been a mistake," he stammered, his voice small in the vastness of the arena. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of outrage and disbelief. Zalver rose from his seat, his bioluminescent markings flaring with fury. "This is an insult," he roared, but the ceremonial master raised a hand for silence. "The laws are absolute," the elder said, her voice calm but unyielding. "The duel begins." Vala's heart sank, but her training held firm. She would not falter, not even against this absurdity. She launched forward, her blades a blur of violet light, her body a symphony of lethal grace. Corin stumbled backward, his human reflexes no match for her speed, his eyes wide with terror. The arena, once a stage for honor, had become a theater of chaos, and Vala's fate hung in the balance. She struck with precision, expecting a parry, a counter from a trained warrior. But Corin only ducked, weaving with the clumsy desperation of someone who'd never held a sword. The crowd's confusion mirrored her own, their murmurs rising to a fever pitch. Vala's blade sang, each strike a testament to her skill, but the human's erratic movements threw her off. He was no warrior, yet he was here, in her sacred space, defiling her chance at redemption. Her golden eyes burned with frustration, her purple skin pulsing brighter with each heartbeat. Corin's mind raced, his engineer's logic grasping for a way out. "I was just fixing a conduit," he shouted, dodging a strike that grazed his armor. The neural interface in the ceremonial gear steadied his movements, guiding his limbs with an alien precision he didn't understand. He didn't want to fight, didn't want to be here, but the woman before him. Her purple skin, her fierce beauty, her deadly grace, was a force he couldn't ignore. She was a storm, and he was caught in its eye. Vala pressed her attack, her blades carving paths of light, her body moving with a fluidity that captivated even as it terrified. The crowd watched, torn between horror and fascination, as the sacred ritual unraveled. Zalvar's voice cut through the chaos, demanding the duel be stopped, but the ceremonial master's gaze was unyielding. "The laws of Ketchan do not bend," she said, and Valan knew there was no turning back. The arena's light pulsed, the violet dusk casting long shadows across the obsidian floor. Vala's heart thundered, her resolve unshaken despite the absurdity before her. She was a warrior, a daughter of House Veraxian, and she would fight, even if her opponent was a human who didn't belong. Corin, sweating and desperate, clung to the sword, his mind racing for a way to survive. Neither knew that this moment, this clash of worlds, would ignite a chain of events that would reshape their destinies, and Ketchan itself. The ceremonial arena of Ketchan blazed with a violet glow, its crystalline walls refracting the eternal dusk into a storm of amethyst light. Corin Lay stood frozen on the obsidian floor, his heart hammering like a malfunctioning engine. The ceremonial armor, thrust upon him by frantic attendants, felt like a lead cage, its neural interface buzzing in his skull, steadying his trembling limbs. Across the arena, Valar of House Veraxian loomed like a goddess of war and desire, her deep purple skin shimmering with a sheen that caught the light, her sleek armor clinging to every curve, full breasts, rounded hips, a silhouette that burned into his mind despite the terror clawing at his chest. Her silver braid swayed as she raised her twin blades, their energy fields humming with lethal promise. Her golden eyes locked onto him, sharp with confusion and fury, and Corin realized he was about to die. "I'm not supposed to be here," he shouted, his voice cracking in the vastness of the arena. The crowd, thousands of Ketchan natives with skin in shades of indigo and lavender, gasped in unison, their ornate headdresses glinting as they leaned forward. The ceremonial master, an elder with faded lilac skin, stood unmoved, her crystal-tipped staff glowing. "Begin," she intoned, her voice a thunderclap that silenced the murmurs. Corin's stomach lurched. He was a systems engineer, not a warrior. His battles were with faulty conduits, not alien Amazons who looked like they could snap him in half with a glance. Vala launched forward, a blur of violet and steel, her blades carving arcs of shimmering light that seemed to sing with her rage. Corin stumbled backward, the ceremonial sword in his hand feeling like a child's toy. "Wait, wait, wait," he yelped, ducking a strike that sliced the air where his head had been. The neural interface in the armor nudged his muscles, guiding his clumsy dodges, but it couldn't make him a fighter. Vala's movements were liquid lightning, her body a symphony of power and grace, each step accentuating the curves her armor barely contained. Corin's mind, traitorously, flickered between terror and awe. Her purple skin glistened with the faintest sweat, her golden eyes burned with a fire that made his knees weak, and her presence was a gravitational pull he couldn't escape. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice melodic yet sharp, slicing through the chaos. Her blades whirled, a strike grazing his armor with a screech of energy. Corin tripped over his own feet, sprawling onto the obsidian floor. "I'm just a tech," he gasped, scrambling away as her next blow sparked against the ground. The crowd's murmurs swelled, a mix of outrage and disbelief, their reverence for the sacred ritual shattered by this absurdity. Corin's mind raced, grasping for logic in a situation that defied it. He'd been checking a conduit junction beneath the arena, following erratic readings, when he'd stumbled into a chamber filled with ceremonial relics. The attendants, speaking little standard, had mistaken him for the duelist, ignoring his protests as they strapped him into this cursed armor. Vala pressed her attack, her blades a relentless storm, each strike precise yet laced with frustration. Through Corin's eyes, she was a paradox, lethal and intoxicating, her purple skin pulsing with bioluminescent veins that danced like starlight. Her armor, though battle-worn, hugged her form like a lover's caress, and every movement sent a jolt through him, equal parts fear and fascination. "Stand and fight," she snarled, her voice carrying the weight of her wounded pride. Corin, still scrambling, raised the ceremonial sword awkwardly, its weight throwing him off balance. "I don't even know how to use this," he shouted, dodging another strike that sent a shockwave through his armor. The arena's violet light pulsed, casting long shadows that twisted like specters. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some shouting for the duel to be stopped, others captivated by the bizarre spectacle. High Commander Zalvar, Vala's father, stood in the stands, his bioluminescent markings flaring with fury. "This is a mockery," he roared, his voice echoing over the chaos. But the ceremonial master's gaze was unyielding, her staff glowing brighter. "The laws of Ketchan are clear," she said, her tone final. "The duel proceeds." Corin's breath came in ragged gasps, his engineer's mind screaming for a way out. He ducked under another of Vala's strikes, his body moving on instinct fueled by the armor's neural link. She was faster, stronger, a warrior born, but her attacks were calculated for a trained opponent, not a flailing human who didn't know the rules. "Look, there's been a mistake," he yelled, diving to the side as her blade whistled past his ear. The crowd gasped again, some leaning forward, others covering their eyes. Vala's golden eyes narrowed, her frustration palpable, her purple skin glowing brighter with each thwarted strike. In a moment of sheer, ridiculous chance, Corin's foot caught on a slightly raised tile, sending him tumbling forward. His outstretched sword, held wrong but pointed outward, snagged Vala's ankle as she advanced. With a gasp that echoed through the stunned arena, the great warrior tripped, her blades clattering across the obsidian floor. She hit the ground hard, her silver braid unraveling, her chest heaving as she stared up at him. Corin froze, sword still extended, his eyes wide with disbelief. The silence that followed was profound, a void that swallowed the crowd's breath, the arena's light, the very heartbeat of Ketchan. Vala's golden eyes burned with shock and humiliation, her purple skin pulsing wildly, the bioluminescent veins like rivers of light. Her armor, scuffed from the fall, still clung to her curves, and Corin, despite himself, couldn't look away. She was a vision, even in defeat, fierce, vulnerable, achingly beautiful. The crowd silence broke into a wave of gasps and whispers, the high houses exchanging stunned glances. Zalvar's roar of outrage shook the stands, but the ceremonial master raised her staff, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The duel is concluded," she declared. "The victor is named." Corin's mouth opened, but no words came. He dropped the sword, its clang echoing in the arena. "I didn't mean to," he stammered, his face flushed, his mind reeling. Vala rose slowly, her movements deliberate, her golden eyes never leaving him. The weight of her defeat, her family's shame, crashed down upon her, but her posture remained unbroken. She was a warrior, even now, and the sight of her, purple skin glowing, armor scarred, eyes blazing, sent a shiver through Corin that had nothing to do with fear. The ceremonial master stepped forward, her faded lilac skin almost translucent under the violet light. "By the laws of Ketchan, the victor claims the oath," she said, her voice a solemn decree. The crowd's whispers grew into a storm, some shouting protests, others staring in morbid fascination. Vala's lips tightened, her golden eyes flickering with something unreadable, anger, shame, or perhaps something deeper. Corin shook his head, his hands raised. "I don't want an oath. I was just trying to fix a conduit." But the laws of Ketchan did not bend for human logic. The arena's light pulsed, the violet dusk casting a surreal glow over the scene. Vala's purple skin seemed to absorb the light, her bioluminescent veins a map of her inner turmoil. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, her armor accentuating every curve as she stood before him. "You have won," she said, her voice low, melodic, laced with a bitterness that cut deeper than her blades. "And I am bound to you." Corin's heart skipped, his engineer's mind grasping for a way to undo this madness. The crowd watched, their eyes a mix of horror and curiosity, as the sacred ritual twisted into something unthinkable. Zalvar's fury was a palpable force, his voice promising retribution, but the ceremonial master's staff glowed with finality. The duel was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Corin, still clutching the useless sword, stared at Vala, her fierce beauty a beacon in the chaos. He was no warrior, no champion, just a human who'd stumbled into a world he didn't understand, and now, impossibly, he held the fate of a warrior goddess in his hands. The violet light of Ketchan's ceremonial arena pulsed like a living heart, its crystalline walls casting fractured shadows across the obsidian floor. Valar of House Veraxian stood before Corin Lay, her deep purple skin shimmering with bioluminescent veins that flared with her turmoil. Her armor, scarred from her fall, clung to her voluptuous form, accentuating her full breasts and rounded hips, a vision of fierce beauty marred by the sting of defeat. Her silver hair, loosened from its braid, framed her face, and her golden eyes burned with a mix of shame and resolve. Corin, still clutching the ceremonial sword he barely knew how to hold, stared back, his human face pale, his brown eyes wide with panic. The crowd's whispers swelled into a storm, the high houses' ornate headdresses glinting as they exchanged shocked glances. The air crackled with the weight of what had just happened. A human, an outsider, had bested a warrior of Ketchan in a sacred duel. Vala's chest heaved, her breath steadying as she forced herself to kneel, the obsidian cold against her knee. The laws of Ketchan were unforgiving, etched into the soul of her people like the runes on their ancient spires. Her voice, melodic yet sharp, cut through the arena's chaos. By the sacred laws of Ketchan, I, Valar of House Veraxian, pledge my blade and soul to you, my victor, she declared, her golden eyes locked on Corin, each word a blade against her pride. Her purple skin pulsed brighter, the bioluminescent veins like rivers of light, betraying the storm within. Corin's mouth opened, his voice a strangled whisper. I don't want this. I'm not your victor. I'm just a tech. The crowd gasped, their murmurs erupting into shouts of outrage. The high houses, their ceremonial armor glinting with precious metals, leaned forward, some clutching their crests in disbelief. High Commander Zalvar, Vala's father, stormed across the arena, his ceremonial cape billowing like a thundercloud, his bioluminescent markings flaring crimson with fury. This is sacrilege, he roared, his voice shaking the crystalline walls. A human cannot claim my daughter's oath. He defiles our traditions. His teal eyes, so like Vala's but hardened by years of command, fixed on Corin with a hatred that could melt steel. Corin shrank back, the ceremonial sword slipping from his grip, clanging against the obsidian floor. The ceremonial master, her faded lilac skin almost translucent, raised her crystal-tipped staff, its glow silencing the arena. The laws of Ketchan are absolute, she said, her voice a calm decree that brooked no argument. Victory, however gained, binds the oath. The human is her master. The word master hung in the air like poison, and Vala's golden eyes flickered, her jaw tightening. Her purple skin, still glistening with the sweat of combat, seemed to absorb the violet light, making her appear both ethereal and untouchable. Yet the weight of her oath anchored her, a chain forged by tradition she could not break. Corin shook his head, his hands raised in protest. This is insane. I was fixing a conduit. I didn't even want to be here. His voice, small and human, seemed to echo in the vastness, drawing a ripple of scorn from the crowd. Zalvar stepped closer, his presence towering, his ceremonial blade glinting at his side. You will not speak in this sacred space, off-worlder, he spat, his markings flaring brighter. You've brought shame upon my house, and I will see this undone. Before Vala could respond, a new voice cut through, sharp and venomous. Kalia of House Silthar stepped forward from the stands, her teal skin gleaming under the arena's light, her armor a sleek contrast to Vala's battle-worn gear. Her lips curled into a predatory smirk, her violet eyes glinting with ambition. "Perhaps House Veraxian's time has passed, Zalvar," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Your daughter kneels to a human, disgraced by a maintenance worker. Let me challenge her shame. Let Silthir prove its strength." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shouting in protest. Kalia's challenge was a calculated strike, exploiting Vala's humiliation to elevate her own house. Vala rose, her movements fluid despite the chaos in her heart. "You dare speak of shame, Kalia?" she snapped, her golden eyes blazing. "You, who've never faced a true test of honor?" Her purple skin pulsed with defiance, her armor catching the light as she stepped forward, a warrior unbroken even in defeat. Kalia's smirk widened, but the ceremonial master's staff glowed brighter, silencing the brewing confrontation. "Enough," the elder said. "The oath is sworn. The council will deliberate on this anomaly." The arena dispersed in a flurry of whispers and glares, the high houses retreating to their chambers, their crests flashing with unspoken alliances and rivalries. Corin was escorted to lavish guest quarters in the governmental complex, his mind reeling. The room was a marvel of Ketchan design, its walls translucent, shimmering with violet light, its furniture carved from crystal that seemed to hum with life. But the luxury felt like a cage, the weight of Vala's oath a chain he didn't want. He paced, his jumpsuit still stained with tunnel grease, his thoughts a tangle of fear and disbelief. "I'm just here to fix their systems," he muttered, running a hand through his unruly hair. "How did I end up with an alien warrior swearing her life to me?" Vala, meanwhile, faced her father in a private chamber, its walls adorned with House Veraxian's crest, a twin-bladed star etched in glowing stone. Zalvar's fury was a palpable force, his teal eyes boring into her. "You've brought ruin upon us," he said, his voice low, each word a lash. "Kneeling to a human, an off-worlder who stumbled into our sacred rites. You made us a laughingstock." Vala stood tall, her purple skin glowing faintly, her armor still clinging to her curves like a second skin. "The oath is sworn, Father," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I honor our laws, as you taught me." Zalvar's markings flared crimson again, his hand twitching toward his blade. "Honor? This is mockery. Kalia will use this to tear us down, and the council will demand your bond be broken." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do what you must to maintain appearances, but I will find a way to end this disgrace." Vala's golden eyes met his, unyielding. "I am your daughter," she said. "I will not break my word, even if it binds me to a human." That night, in the shadowed halls of the guest wing, danger struck. Corin, restless in his opulent quarters, sensed a shift in the air, a faint hum, like a conduit about to fail. Before he could react, a figure lunged from the darkness, a blade glinting with malicious intent. Vala appeared like a specter, her twin blades flashing as she intercepted the assassin. The struggle was brief, her movements a dance of lethal precision, her purple skin glowing with exertion. The attacker, a Ketchan clad in black, collapsed, unconscious at her feet. Corin's breath caught, his eyes drawn to her, her armor torn slightly at the shoulder, revealing a glimpse of her shimmering skin, her chest heaving, her golden eyes fierce yet protective. "How did you—" he began, his voice shaking. Vala sheathed her blades, her silhouette a vision of power and allure against the translucent walls. "I stand guard," she said matter-of-factly, her voice low, almost intimate. "The oath burns within me. I have no choice but to protect you." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, something flickered, duty warring with something deeper unspoken. Corin swallowed hard, his pulse racing, not just from the attack but from her proximity, her fierce beauty a magnet he couldn't resist. "They'll keep coming, won't they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vala's lips tightened, her purple skin catching the violet light like a starfield. "Many see your victory as an affront," she said. "Your death would restore their order." She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, her armor accentuating every curve. "You are no warrior, human, but you are my burden now. Accept it, or we both fall." Corin's mind spun, the weight of her words sinking in. He was a stranger in a world of blades and honor, bound to a woman who was both protector and enigma. The violet dusk outside cast long shadows, mirroring the uncertainty within him. Vala turned, her silver hair swaying, her golden eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. The assassin's body lay still, a warning of the dangers to come. Ketchan's laws had forged a chain between them, but the true test of that bond was only beginning. The undercity of Ketchan sprawled beneath the capital like a forgotten dream, a labyrinth of collapsed spires and shattered crystal, bathed in a dim violet glow that seeped through fissures in the surface. Corin Lay stumbled through the treacherous passages, his breath ragged, his jumpsuit torn from jagged stone. Valar of House Veraxian led the way, her deep purple skin shimmering faintly, her sleek armor catching the sparse light to highlight her full breasts and rounded hips. Her silver hair, now loose, swayed with each precise step, and her golden eyes scanned the shadows for threats. The air was thick with dust and the hum of ancient machinery, a reminder of Ketchan's lost glory. Behind them, the echoes of pursuit. House Veraxian's hunters, spurred by Zalvar's fury, grew fainter, but the danger lingered like a blade at their throats. Corin's flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows across walls etched with glowing runes, their patterns hinting at a civilization older than the high houses. "This place is a maze," he muttered, his voice hoarse from exertion. "How do you even know where we're going?" Vala glanced back, her golden eyes glinting in the gloom. "I explored these ruins as a child," she said, her melodic voice soft but firm. "When the weight of training grew too heavy, I'd slip away to lose myself here. It's a sanctuary if you know its secrets." Her armor, scarred from the arena, clung to her curves, and Corin's gaze lingered despite himself, drawn to the way her purple skin seemed to pulse with life, a beacon in the darkness. They reached a cavernous chamber, its ceiling a mosaic of cracked crystal that refracted the violet light into a shimmering veil. Collapsed pillars lay like fallen giants, their surfaces carved with scenes of ancient duels, their edges softened by time. A faint hum emanated from a central dais, where a dormant device, half machine, half relic, glowed with a soft amethyst pulse. Corin's engineer's curiosity stirred, his fingers itching to investigate, but Vala's hand on his arm stopped him. "Not now," she said, her touch firm yet fleeting, sending a jolt through him. "We rest here. They won't find us for a while." They settled against a pillar, the stone cool against Corin's back. Vala sat across from him, her blades within reach, her posture alert but her golden eyes softer, almost contemplative. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant drip of water and the hum of the relic. Corin's mind raced, replaying the arena, the oath the assassin's blade. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low. "Protecting me, I mean. You could just walk away." Vala's lips tightened, her purple skin catching the light as she leaned forward, her armor accentuating her curves in a way that made his pulse quicken. "The oath is not a choice," she said, her voice carrying a weight he couldn't fully grasp. "It binds my soul to yours, human. To abandon you is to abandon myself." Corin ran a hand through his unruly hair, his brown eyes searching hers. "I'm not your master, Vala. I'm just a guy who fixes things. I don't belong in your world." Her golden eyes flickered, a shadow crossing her face. "And yet here you are," she said, her voice softer now, almost intimate. "You stumbled into my arena, into my life, and now we're both caught in this storm." She paused, her gaze dropping to the runes on the floor. "When I was young, I'd hide here to escape my father's expectations. I wanted to be more than a warrior, more than a Veraxian. But duty always called me back." Corin leaned forward, drawn to her vulnerability. "What did you want to be?" he asked, his voice gentle. Vala's lips curved into a faint, wistful smile, her purple skin glowing softly. "A seeker," she said, "to explore the stars, to find truths beyond Ketchan's laws." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the weight of her oath seemed to lift, replaced by a shared understanding. Corin's heart thudded, his engineer's logic faltering under the pull of her presence. "I wanted that too," he admitted. "To see the galaxy, to fix things that matter. Guess we're both stuck now." The hum of the relic grew louder, its amethyst glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Corin's curiosity won out, and he approached the dais, his flashlight revealing intricate circuits woven into the crystal. "This is old," he murmured, his fingers tracing the patterns. "Some kind of power core, maybe a data archive." Vala joined him, her shoulder brushing his, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold stone. "The elders called it a memory vault," she said, her voice low, her breath close enough to stir his hair. "It holds the stories of our ancestors, but no one's activated it in centuries." Corin's eyes lit up, his engineer's mind racing. "If I could get it working, it might give us leverage, something to bargain with." Before Vala could respond, a low growl echoed through the chamber, and a creature lunged from the shadows, a hulking beast with crystalline claws and eyes like burning coals. Vala shoved Corin aside, her blades flashing as she met the attack. Her movements were a deadly ballet, her purple skin glistening with exertion, her armor straining as she twisted and struck. The beast roared, its claws raking her arm, tearing a gash in her armor that revealed a glimpse of her shimmering skin. Corin scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding, and grabbed a jagged crystal shard, hurling it at the creature's flank. It howled, distracted just long enough for Vala to drive her blade into its core, felling it with a shuddering crash. She stood over the beast, her chest heaving, her silver hair wild, her golden eyes fierce yet weary. Blood trickled from her arm, mingling with the violet glow of her skin. Corin rushed to her, his hands hovering, unsure. "You're hurt," he said, his voice thick with concern. Vala waved him off, but her gaze softened, her lips parting slightly. "It's nothing," she said, but she didn't pull away when his fingers brushed her arm, checking the wound. The touch lingered, electric, and their eyes locked, the air between them charged with something unspoken. The violet glow of the chamber seemed to dim, the world narrowing to just them. Vala's hand found his chest, her fingers splaying against his jumpsuit, her warmth searing through the fabric. "You're reckless," she murmured, her voice a low purr that sent a shiver down his spine. Corin's breath hitched, his brown eyes tracing the contours of her face, the way her purple skin caught the light, the fierce beauty that made his heart race. "You're the one fighting monsters," he said, his voice husky, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Her golden eyes darkened, a storm of duty and desire swirling within, and she stepped closer, her body inches from his, her armor accentuating every curve. Without warning, Vala pulled him to her, her lips crashing against his in a kiss that burned with raw, pent-up passion. It was fierce, desperate, a collision of worlds. Her purple skin warm against his, her silver hair brushing his cheek, her breath mingling with his in a rhythm that drowned out the hum of the relic. Corin's hands found her waist, the sleek armor smooth under his fingers, and they sank to the stone floor, the violet light casting a dreamlike haze over them. Her bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter, a map of her desire, and the chamber seemed to fade, leaving only the heat of their bodies, the press of skin against skin, the shared pulse of something deeper than duty. The night blurred into a timeless embrace, their connection sealed in whispers and shadows, a secret forged in the heart of Ketchan's ruins. When dawn's faint light seeped through the fissures, they sat side by side, their shoulders touching, the relic's glow dimmed but steady. Vala's armor was scuffed, her wound bandaged with a strip of Corin's jumpsuit, her golden eyes softer but resolute. Corin's hair was messier than ever, his face flushed with the memory of their night. "What now?" he asked, his voice quiet, the weight of their bond heavier than ever. Vala's lips curved, not quite a smile. "We survive," she said, her hand brushing his, a promise in the touch. Together, the hum of pursuit grew closer, the hunter's footsteps echoing in the distance. Vala rose, her blades gleaming, her purple skin a beacon of defiance. Corin stood beside her, his engineer's mind already plotting, the memory vault's secrets a spark of hope. Their night had changed them, forging a bond beyond the oath, but the dangers of Ketchan loomed larger than ever, and their fight was far from over. Ketchan's violet dusk shattered as the yard ascended, their insectoid warships slicing through the amethyst haze like knives through silk. The capital trembled, its crystalline spires quaking as sleek, obsidian ships unleashed barges of plasma, their red glow painting the sky in apocalyptic hues. Alarms wailed through the Undercity, their shrill echoes bouncing off the ruined walls where Corin Lay and Valar of House Veraxian had taken refuge. The air thrummed with chaos, the hum of ancient machinery drowned by the distant screams of a city under siege. Vala stood at the chamber's edge, her deep purple skin pulsing with bioluminescent veins, her battle-scarred armor clinging to her voluptuous form, accentuating her full breasts and rounded hips. Her silver hair whipped in the draft, her golden eyes scanning the flickering shadows, blades drawn and gleaming. Corin crouched beside the memory vault, his flashlight illuminating its intricate circuits, his engineer's mind racing to decipher its secrets before the world above collapsed. "They're here," Vala said, her voice a low growl, melodic yet laced with steel. Her posture was taut, a warrior born, her purple skin catching the dim violet glow of the ruins in a way that made Corin's breath catch, even amidst the chaos. He tore his gaze from her, focusing on the vault's pulsing core. "Those ships, they're targeting something specific," he said, his voice tight, his fingers tracing the crystal circuits. "The readings I saw in the tunnels, they're after your tech, maybe something like this." Vala's golden eyes flicked to him, sharp with respect, but edged with urgency. "Then we move," she said, sheathing one blade to grip his arm, her touch firm yet electric. "If the Yar want our past, they'll face our present." They emerged from the Undercity into a cityscape of fire and ruin. Ketchan's crystalline towers burned, their facets refracting the plasma blasts into a kaleidoscope of destruction. Civilians fled through the streets, their indigo and lavender skins flashing with panic, while warriors in ceremonial armor rallied to form defensive lines. The Yar ships hovered like predators, their hulls pulsing with red light, deploying swarms of insectoid drones that skittered across the ground, their mandibles snapping with mechanical precision. Vala led Corin through the chaos, her blades a blur as she cut down a drone that lunged too close, its exoskeleton sparking under her strike. Her movements were a deadly dance, her armor straining against her curves, her purple skin glistening with sweat that caught the firelight, a vision of fierce allure that Corin couldn't ignore, even as death loomed. They reached the central command spire, a towering structure of crystal and steel, its upper level scarred by plasma burns. Inside, the war room buzzed with activity, Ketchan officers shouting orders over holographic displays that flickered with static. High Commander Zalvar stood at the center, his bioluminescent markings flaring crimson, his teal eyes blazing as he coordinated the defense. Kalia, the teal-skinned rival from House Silthar, lingered nearby, her violet eyes cold and calculating, her armor polished to a predatory sheen. Vala's presence drew every gaze, her purple skin a beacon of defiance, her battle-worn armor accentuating her form in a way that made even the hardened warriors pause. Zalvar's eyes narrowed at Corin, his voice a snarl. "You bring this human here, Vala? He's a liability. He's an asset," Vala snapped, her golden eyes flashing, her stance unyielding. "He sees what we miss." Corin stepped forward, his jumpsuit stained with dust and blood, his brown eyes scanning the holographic display. The map showed the Yar's attack patterns, precise, surgical, targeting communication hubs and defense grids. "They're isolating you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I've seen this in space station blackouts. They're cutting your networks to blind you, then they'll hit your core systems. Probably aiming for something like that memory vault." Zalver scoffed, his markings flaring brighter. "A human lecture me on war? Preposterous." But Vala's hand on Corin's shoulder silenced him, her touch a quiet assertion of trust. "Listen to him, father," she said, her voice low, commanding, her purple skin glowing with conviction. "He saved us once already." Kalia's smirk twisted, her voice cutting in like a blade. "Saved you? Or doomed you? Kneeling to this off-worlder?" Vala's golden eyes locked onto Kalia's, a silent promise of reckoning. But the urgency of the attack forced her focus back to the war. Corin leaned over the display, his engineer's mind dissecting the data. "They're using a phased disruption pattern," he said, pointing to the flickering nodes. "If we reroute your auxiliary power through the secondary grid, we can restore comms and get a lock on their command ship." The officers exchanged skeptical glances, but Vala's nod was enough. "Do it," she said, her voice a spark in the dark, her armor catching the hologram's light to highlight her curves, a distraction Corin fought to ignore. He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the alien interface, adapting human logic to Ketchan tech. The screen stabilized, revealing the Yar fleet's formation, a tight cluster orbiting a massive command ship, its red pulse a heartbeat of menace. Vala rallied the warriors, her voice rising above the chaos, melodic yet fierce. "We are Ketchan. We do not bow to invaders." Her purple skin blazed with bioluminescent veins, her silver hair whipping as she raised her blades, her armor a testament to her unyielding spirit. The warriors roared, their ceremonial armor glinting as they prepared to strike. Corin's eyes followed her, drawn to the way her body moved. Fluid, powerful, a storm of grace and fury. "Focus, human," she teased, catching his gaze, a rare smile curving her lips that sent a jolt through him, a fleeting moment of warmth amidst the war. The counterattack began, Ketchan fighters launching from hidden bays, their ships weaving through the plasma storm to engage the Yar drones. Vala led a ground assault, her blades carving through insectoid attackers, her purple skin glistening with exertion, her armor torn at the thigh to reveal a glimpse of shimmering skin that made Corin's pulse race. He stayed in the war room, coordinating with the techs, his voice steady as he guided the power reroute. "Almost there," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow, the screen showing the comms grid flickering back to life. The Ketchan forces regained coordination, their fighters targeting the Yar's weak points, but the command ship remained untouchable, its red pulse growing stronger. Kalia's voice slithered through the noise, her teal skin glinting as she leaned close to Zalver. "This human's plan will fail," she whispered, her violet eyes darting to Vala. "Let me lead the assault. Silthar will claim the glory." Zalver's markings flared, his teal eyes conflicted, but Vala's shout cut through. "Trust him," she called, her golden eyes fierce as she fought off a drone, her blades ablur, her purple skin a radiant defiance against the chaos. Corin's heart pounded, her faith in him a lifeline, and he pushed the final command, the grid surging with power. The screens lit up, pinpointing the command ship's location, and the Ketchan fighters adjusted their attack, hammering its defenses. The ground shook as a plasma blast struck the spire, sending crystal shards raining down. Vala dove to shield Corin, her body pressing against his, her warmth searing through his jumpsuit. "Stay alive, human," she growled, her golden eyes inches from his, her purple skin glowing with intensity. Corin nodded, his breath ragged, the feel of her against him a distraction he couldn't afford. She pulled back, her blades flashing as she rejoined the fight, her armor straining with each strike, her allure a constant pull on his focus. The battle raged, the Yar drones relentless, their mandibles snapping as they swarmed the streets. Vala fought like a tempest, her purple skin a beacon in the firelight, her silver hair wild, her golden eyes burning with unyielding resolve. Corin's plan held, the comms grid stabilizing, but the command ship's red pulse intensified, a sign of a larger threat. Kalia's cold stare lingered on Vala, her intentions unclear, her teal skin a stark contrast to the chaos. Zalvar's voice boomed, ordering a full assault, but Corin's mind raced, piecing together the Yar strategy. "They're not just invading," he said, his voice cutting through the war room. "They want something specific, something in the Undercity, like the Vault." Vala's golden eyes met his across the chaos, a silent agreement passing between them. Her purple skin glistened, her armor scarred but unbroken, her presence a fire that burned through the fear. The Yar's assault was far from over, and the fight for Ketchan's survival demanded everything they had: Corin's logic, Vala's blades, and the fragile bond forged in the ruins below. The Yar command ship loomed over Ketchan like a predatory beast, its obsidian hull pulsing with a malevolent red glow that bled into the violet dusk. Inside, its corridors writhed with a sickly crimson light, casting jagged shadows across walls of segmented metal, their surfaces etched with alien glyphs that seemed to hum with malice. Corin Lay and Valar of House Veraxian moved through the labyrinth, their footsteps muffled by the ship's organic hum, a heartbeat of machinery and menace. Vala led, her deep purple skin shimmering faintly, her battle-scarred armor clinging to her voluptuous form, accentuating her full breasts and rounded hips. Her silver hair, matted with sweat, clung to her neck, and her golden eyes burned with unyielding resolve, her twin blades gleaming in the red haze. Corin followed, his jumpsuit torn, his engineer's mind sharp despite the terror gnawing at his core, a stolen interface device clutched in his trembling hands. They had slipped aboard via a damaged shuttle bay, a desperate plan born in the chaos of Ketchan's burning streets. The Central Command Spire's defenses were crumbling, and Corin's rerouted grid had bought time, but the Yar's command ship remained the key, a nerve center directing the swarm. "We disable it. We stop them," Corin had said, his voice steady despite Zalvar's scorn. Vala's nod, her golden eyes fierce with trust, had sealed their mission. Now, deep in the enemy's heart, every shadow held a threat. Vala's blades twitched, her purple skin pulsing with bioluminescent veins, a beacon of defiance in the alien gloom. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice a melodic growl that sent a shiver through Corin, her allure undimmed by the danger. The corridor split, one path leading to the ship's core, the other to its security hub. Corin's stolen device flickered, its screen displaying a partial map. "Security hub's that way," he said, pointing left, his brown eyes scanning the glyphs. "If I can hack their systems, I can turn their defenses against them." Vala's golden eyes narrowed, her lips tightening. "It's a risk," she said, her voice low, her armor catching the red light to highlight her curves, a distraction Corin fought to ignore. "But we have no choice." She gripped his shoulder, her touch firm, grounding. "You do your part, human. I'll keep them off you." Her words were a vow, her purple skin glowing with conviction, and Corin nodded, his pulse racing, not just from fear, but from the fire in her gaze. They moved swiftly, Vala's blades carving through a drone that scuttled from a vent, its mandibles snapping as it sparked and died. Her movements were lethal poetry, her armor straining with each strike, a tear at her thigh revealing a flash of shimmering purple skin that caught the crimson light. Corin's breath hitched, his engineer's logic warring with the pull of her fierce beauty. "Focus," she snapped, catching his gaze, a faint smirk curving her lips that sent a jolt through him. He forced his eyes to the device, its data streams a puzzle he could solve. The security hub loomed ahead, a chamber of pulsating red nodes, their surfaces crawling with insectoid tech that seemed to watch them. Corin knelt at a central terminal, his fingers flying over the alien interface, adapting human hacking techniques to the Yar systems. "It's like rewiring a starship blind," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow. Vala stood guard, her blades raised, her purple skin glistening with exertion, her golden eyes scanning the shadows. A low hum grew louder, and a swarm of your soldiers, hulking insectoids with segmented armor and glowing red eyes, burst through a side passage. Vala met them head-on, her blades ablur, slicing through their exoskeletons with sparks of violet energy. Her armor tore at the shoulder, revealing more of her shimmering skin, her sweat catching the light as she spun and struck, a warrior goddess in the heart of hell. "Keep going," she shouted, her voice cutting through the clash of metal, her purple skin blazing with bioluminescent veins. Corin's hands shook, but his mind locked onto the code, finding a backdoor in the Yar's security grid. "Almost there," he said, his voice tight, the terminal's red glow reflecting in his eyes. Vala fought with relentless precision, her blades carving paths of destruction, her body a symphony of power and grace. A Yar soldier lunged, its claws raking her side, and she staggered, blood mixing with the violet glow of her skin. "Vala!" Corin yelled, his heart lurching, but she drove her blade into the creature's core, felling it with a guttural cry. The terminal beeped, and Corin's hack took hold, the ship's defenses turning inward. Turrets activated, spraying plasma at the Yar soldiers, their screeches echoing as they fell. Vala leaned against a node, her chest heaving, her golden eyes fierce but pained, her armor now a patchwork of tears that revealed flashes of her purple skin, glistening with sweat and blood. "You did it," she said, her voice a ragged whisper, her lips curving into a faint smile that made Corin's pulse race. He rushed to her, his hands hovering over her wounds. "You're hurt," he said, his voice thick with fear, his brown eyes searching hers. Before she could respond, a plasma blast rocked the chamber, a stray shot from a collapsing turret. Vala shoved Corin aside, taking the brunt of the explosion. She crumpled, her blades clattering to the floor, her purple skin's glow fading like a dying star. "No!" Corin roared, catching her, his hands trembling against her cooling skin, her bioluminescent veins flickering weakly. Her golden eyes fluttered, her breath shallow, but her hand gripped his arm, her touch a lifeline. "Finish it," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her lips pale but resolute. Corin's heart shattered, but he dragged her to the terminal, his fingers flying over the interface, tears blurring his vision. The hack spread, disabling the Yar fleet's coordination, their ships faltering in Ketchan's orbit. Corin's voice shook as he shouted into the comms, stolen from a fallen soldier. "Ketchan forces now. Hit the command ship." Below, the city's fighters surged, their plasma cannons hammering the weakened fleet. But Corin's focus was on Vala, her purple skin dim, her golden eyes half closed. He cradled her, his hands stained with her blood, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, Vala. Please." Her fingers brushed his cheek, weak but warm, her lips parting in a faint smile. "You're more than a tech," she murmured, her voice a thread of hope. The chamber trembled, the ship's systems failing under Corin's sabotage. He lifted Vala, her weight heavy in his arms, her purple skin still beautiful even in its fading glow, and staggered toward an escape pod in the corridor's end. The pod's interior was cramped, its red light dim, but it was their only chance. He sealed the door, laying Vala on the narrow bench, her golden eyes flickering as she fought to stay conscious. "We did it," she whispered, her hand finding his, her touch igniting a spark in the dark. Corin's breath caught, his brown eyes locked on hers, the world narrowing to the space between them. In the pod's confines, their bodies pressed close, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold metal. Her purple skin, though dimmed, glowed faintly, her bioluminescent veins a map of her resilience. Corin's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing her lips, their breaths sinking in a rhythm that drowned out the ship's dying hum. "I'm not losing you," he said, his voice raw, his heart laid bare. Vala's golden eyes darkened, a storm of pain and desire, and she pulled him closer, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling. The stars blurred outside the pod's viewport, a silent witness to their unspoken promise, a connection forged in sacrifice and fire. The pod jettisoned, hurtling toward Ketchan as the command ship erupted in a cascade of red and violet, the Yar fleet crumbling in its wake. Vala's hand tightened in Corin's, her golden eyes holding his, her purple skin's glow steadying, a sign of life clinging to hope. The battle was won, but her wounds were grave, and Corin's heart pounded with the fear of what lay ahead. Their bodies remained close, the pod's red light casting a dreamlike haze, their bond a lifeline in the chaos, a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. Ketchan's capital lay in smoldering ruin under the eternal violet dusk, its crystalline spires fractured but defiant, their facets catching the amethyst haze in a fragile dance of light. Smoke curled through the streets, mingling with the faint glow of bioluminescent flora that clung to life amidst the wreckage. The Yar's defeat had come at a cost, but hope flickered in the hearts of the Ketchan people, their indigo and lavender skins flashing as they began to rebuild. In the heart of the city, the Imperial Council's chamber stood untouched, its translucent walls shimmering with a serene violet glow, a beacon of resilience. Valar of House Veraxian stood before the council, her deep purple skin radiant, its bioluminescent veins pulsing softly, no longer with the fire of battle, but with a quiet strength. Her battle-scarred armor had been discarded, replaced by a flowing violet robe that hugged her voluptuous form, accentuating her full breasts and rounded hips, a garment that spoke of both grace and power. Her silver hair cascaded freely, and her golden eyes gleamed with a resolve that silenced the room. Corin Lay stood beside her, his jumpsuit patched but clean, his unruly brown hair tamed for the occasion. His brown eyes, once wide with panic, now held a steady calm, forged in the crucible of their shared trials. The council, a circle of elders with skins ranging from pale lilac to deep indigo, regarded them with a mix of reverence and curiosity. The ceremonial master, her faded lilac skin almost translucent, raised her crystal-tipped staff, its glow casting a soft halo. "Valar of House Veraxian," she intoned, her voice resonant. "Your valor has saved Ketchan. The Yar are vanquished, their threat extinguished by your blades and the human's ingenuity. The oath you swore is fulfilled." The chamber's air shifted, the weight of her bond with Corin lifting like a veil. Vala's golden eyes flickered, her purple skin glowing brighter, as if reflecting the freedom within. The council's words were a formality, but they carried the power to reshape her path. High Commander Zalvar, her father, stood among the elders, his bioluminescent markings subdued, his teal eyes heavy with a mix of pride and regret. "You've forged a new path, daughter," he said, his voice low, each word measured. "House Veraxian stands because of you. But the cost," he trailed off, his gaze shifting to Corin, the human who had upended their world. Kalia, the teal-skinned rival from House Silthar, was absent, her betrayal exposed during the battle's chaos. Whispers among the warriors revealed her attempt to sabotage the defense grid, hoping to claim glory for her house. The council had exiled her, her violet eyes and predatory smirk banished to the outer colonies, a warning to those who would exploit Ketchan's trials. Vala's lips tightened at the memory, her golden eyes flashing, but she let it pass. Her focus was elsewhere, on the man beside her, whose quiet strength had become her anchor. The ceremonial master turned to Corin, her staff's glow softening. "Corin Lay of Earth, your mind turned the tide. Ketchan owes you a debt, though your presence defies our traditions." The elders murmured, some nodding, others exchanging wary glances. Corin shifted, his hands clasped, his voice steady but humble. "I just did what I could," he said, his brown eyes meeting Vala's, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. "Vala's the one who carried us through." Her purple skin pulsed, her golden eyes softening, a faint smile curving her lips that sent a warmth through him, a reminder of the night they'd shared in the ruins. The council's decree was final. Vala was free, her oath dissolved, her honor restored. The chamber's translucent walls seemed to brighten, the violet dusk outside casting a dreamlike glow. Zalvar stepped forward, his ceremonial cape brushing the floor, his voice softer now. "You are my daughter, Vala," he said, his teal eyes searching hers. "You've honored our name, but your path is your own." He paused, glancing at Corin, a grudging respect in his gaze. "Choose wisely." Vala faced Corin, her violet robe flowing like liquid starlight, its fabric clinging to her curves in a way that made his pulse quicken. The chamber faded, the elders, the council, even Zalvar dissolving into the background. Her golden eyes blazed with a love that burned brighter than any oath, her purple skin radiant, a beacon that had guided him through fire and shadow. "I stay not for duty," she said, her voice a melodic vow, each word a caress. "I stay for you, Corin." Her hand found his, her fingers intertwining, her touch electric, grounding, a promise forged in choice, not law. Corin's breath caught, his brown eyes locked on hers, the weight of her words sinking into his soul. "Vala," he said, his voice husky, raw with emotion, "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm not letting go." Her lips parted, a smile breaking through, fierce and tender, her purple skin glowing with a warmth that made the violet dusk seem pale. She stepped closer, her robe brushing his jumpsuit, her body inches from his, the air between them charged with unspoken desire. "Then we write our own saga," she whispered, her golden eyes darkening, a storm of love and longing that pulled him in. The council chamber dissolved into murmurs, the elders retreating, their work done. Zalvar watched, his teal eyes conflicted but silent, a father yielding to his daughter's heart. Corin and Vala left the chamber hand in hand, their steps light despite the ruins outside. The city's streets, though scarred, buzzed with renewal. Ketchan's people salvaging crystal and steel, their bioluminescent skins flashing with hope. The violet dusk bathed them in its eternal glow, a canvas for their future. They reached a small hangar, where a sleek Ketchan shuttle waited, its hull shimmering with violet and silver, a gift from the council for their valor. Inside, the cockpit was a marvel of crystal and tech, its consoles glowing with the same amethyst pulse as the memory vault. Corin's engineer's heart stirred, but his focus was on Vala, her violet robe catching the light as she stood beside him, her golden eyes bright with possibility. "Where to?" he asked, his voice soft, his hands still entwined with hers. She leaned closer, her purple skin radiant, her lips brushing his ear. "The stars," she said, her voice a melody of adventure and love. Together, they boarded the shuttle, the violet dusk fading behind them as the engines hummed to life. The city's ruins shrank below, a testament to their victory, their sacrifice. Vala's hand rested on Corin's, her golden eyes reflecting the starfield beyond, her purple skin a radiant promise of the journey ahead. The shuttle broke orbit, the violet haze of Ketchan giving way to the infinite black, a canvas for their own saga. Their hands remained entwined, their breaths sinking, a silent vow to face the unknown as one, their love a fire that would burn across the stars.